All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Nothing for Nothing Leaves Nothing podcast. I'm your host, Lewis, and today's topic is going to be when people don't get it. Let's talk about it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the episode. Like I said, we're going to talk about on today's episode about when people don't get it. Now, why do we pick this particular topic to talk about? Well, recently, with some friends of mine and conversations I've been having with some folks, just going over some things and things going on from conversations and interactions with people when sometimes when you're telling people stuff and they're just not putting two and two together. So we decided to have a conversation about it. So let's talk about it. So what does it mean when somebody doesn't get it? So obviously the basic context clues of it is you have a conversation with somebody, you express something to them, and no matter what you say to them, it's just not registering for some reason, right? So when you look at that, you always want to wonder, like, okay, why are they not getting it? Why is it not clicking for this person? Why are they not understanding what I'm saying to them? A lot of times it could be a variety of reasons. First thing could be they just don't understand what you're saying, or they're not able to put the context clues of what you're saying to them together, or they just don't care. They have their own mindset made up. They have their own thought process and logic, and regardless of what you say to them, that's what they tend to roll with. A lot of times with stuff like this, you tend to see this in situations where you have people communicating 9 times out of 10, usually with the fact of, say, if somebody is chasing a person. I'll use that one as the first example. So you got two individuals, one person is trying to talk to the person and the other person is not trying to feel it or not trying to hear it. And the person is still under the impression, regardless of what you say to them, like you can try to put them down nicely, like, hey, not interested, or whatever the situation may be. And the person is just not getting it. They have a warped sense in their mind, in their head, that regardless of what you say to them, it's not registering. And you see it a lot, like you see it in TV shows and things like that, where they show, a person chasing another person, and they're like, hey man, or hey girl, I'm not interested, it's cool, appreciate it, flattered, or whatever. And the person's like, I'm wearing them down. I had talked about it in a previous episode where I had a friend of mine that he was one of those dudes, right? Like we would tell him, like, look man, like she's not interested, she's just trying to be a friend to you, and the person's like, nah man, like she wants me and all this other stuff. Warped mindset, just not clicking and just not picking up on the things going on around them. But when you see things like that, it doesn't always pertain to just a relationship thing. A lot of times it can come from just normal interactions with folks. So you think people that you work with, people that you interact with on a daily basis consistently, and you can see that you're having conversations with individuals, and this just goes across the board, and having these conversations, like, you tend to look at yourself and feel like no matter what you're saying to a person, they're just not getting it for whatever reason that it is. And like I said, a lot of times it could be they're not understanding what you're saying, or they just choose not to understand what you're saying because they have their own thought process and own view on a particular situation or a particular subject of things going on. So the one thing that you tend to look at in those situations is, okay, how do I deal with this situation? How do I deal with situations like this? And a lot of times it just gets to the point where you can be as firm, or try to be as firm as you can, or try to be as, I would say, cordial or, caring in dealing with those situations and dealing with those situations with knit gloves, that you still find yourself in a situation where, the person's just not getting it. And depending on what the situation is. So like I said, obviously if it's somebody, when it comes to somebody pursuing a relationship or something like that, okay, yeah, you can distance yourself from that person and try to, kind of cut that person off as best you can. But what do you do if it's somebody that you have to see on a regular basis, whether it's, you have to interact with them at work, or you're coming across them because y'all bump into each other at the coffee spot, or, just y'all are constantly around each other because of the circle that you're rolling, or different situations. It kind of proves kind of difficult to get a person to kind of just back off when they're not, they're not picking up the clues, like, hey, this is not a thing, chill out, like, go sit down somewhere. And that's that situation. Like I said, that's a relationship look at it. But when it comes to like interactions, and you think about like somebody you're dealing with at work, right? Say you have a person that you deal with at work on a daily basis that you have to interact with for whatever reason that it may be, and you come across and have conversations with this person, and people in, I would say 90% of the people in the world have come across a person like this at their job, where you have that one person that they have their thought process on whether it's the rules of the job or, how things are supposed to function or how things are supposed to go. And they believe that whatever they say is gospel in a sense. And it's like, how do you deal with people like that? A lot of times in my experience, what I've done is just let them do what they do, right? At the end of the day, they always say you can give people enough rope for them to hang themselves with, in a sense. And that's not literally like somebody hanging themselves, but it's metaphorically in the sense of they will eventually get themselves into a situation where it's going to cost them at some point. And the reason that happens is because anytime if you're in a place or in a situation where you are not the main person in control for whatever reason, like I said, especially like using the job as an example, if your name is not on the side of the building or where you're working, then you have to abide by the rules that are there and that are set for you. You don't get to make up your own rules and try to tell the rules that's there like, oh man, these are wrong, this has to change, whatever, stuff like that. Those rules and stuff are there for a reason. Now, you have a choice to make. You can roll with it, or you can try to fight against the grain. And 9 times out of 10, when people fighting against the grain, they end up paying for it in the long run by one, either losing their job or catching a demotion or whatever the situation may be. So it's one of those things when you're dealing with people that just don't get it for whatever reason. It's like you just have to deal with every situation, I would say, as it comes, and with a case by case basis. This is not one of those situations where you can kind of make a blanket thing and say, okay, this is the correct way to handle it, because every situation is different and everything changes depending on the individual that you're dealing with and the individual's mindset. So like, to go back to like a relationship piece, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, like I said, you can have a person where you can have conversations with them, you can tell them things and talk to them about stuff, and they're like, hey, look man, or look lady, look, not interested, this is what's going on, this is what the situation is, and they just continue to do their thing and do some stuff that's like just off kilter, and you're like, man, like, why is that? Like, what in the world is going on? And you're like, why is this person not getting it? I've told this person I don't know how many times, I don't know how many different ways, and they're still not getting it. So the one thing about those situations is you have to be careful and cautious, because those situations can then turn into, can sometimes turn into a dangerous situation if you're not careful. Because if you have a person that is that focused or fixated on you, and you've told this person, no, I'm not interested or whatever, and they're still that obsessive, that could turn into a problem. Flip caveat is, like I said, if you have to see and deal with this person on a normal basis for whatever reason is, like coming across the same circles or whatever, you just have to be mindful and be able to set your standard and your boundary to make sure that you are protecting yourself and keeping yourself from being caught and wrapped up in a situation that you don't want to be in. And when it comes to the work aspect or just the normal interactions with folks, sorry, my dog's going crazy in the background. You have to be aware and understand that you can't leave yourself open for situations to happen, whether that's at work, whether it's a normal interaction, or whatever the situation may be. So like I said, whether it's at work or dealing with a different kind of situation, you just have to be mindful of what you're dealing with and the individuals that you're interacting with. The only way to be able to protect yourself is to make sure that the things that are getting done and how you're conveying it is conveyed the best way you know how. And the only way to do that is to try to be as fair and as firm and try to convey your thoughts as best way you can. That's the only thing you can do. That's the only way to really deal with those situations without it turning into a crazy situation. But that is going to be all on this particular topic. Coming back, the next one, we're going to talk about thought processes and how those things are different between people, and how those different thought processes causes people to respond and react to situations in that particular field. So make sure you guys like, listen, subscribe, keep an ear out, keep tapping in, keep listening, and keep sharing. That is the end of this episode, and we will catch you guys on the next go around. Check in with you later.